Welcome to Backchat, my new series where I get to talk to some of Britain's leading health experts for their top tips and advice. Today we're dedicating this episode of Backchat to a community who are very interested in their back health. I'm talking about Britain's 10 million runners. I've come to North London today to meet with Gavin Burt, a top sports osteopath and an accomplished runner himself, and he runs a very successful practice called Backs and Beyonds, and the web link is below. So Gavin, I can see you have a lot of amazing race medals here. Have you ever run a marathon?
Well, thank you very much for asking, Nichola, and thank you for noticing the medals. And thank you very much for having me on your show. I've run 12 marathons in total, and I've run probably about 30 half marathons. It's really just my excuse for travelling. So I've been to the French Alps, been to Florence, Rome, Copenhagen, Oslo, and I've run the London Marathon twice.
Very impressive. So what kinds of runners have you and your team treated for back injuries?
Well, over the last 13 years, Backs and Beyond has developed good relationships with most of the London running clubs, like Serpentine Runners Club and Highgate, Harriers and Heathside, for example. But most of the people we treat are regular amateur runners like you and I, who just enjoy running 5k every week or so. We've also treated elite runners. It's been my honour to have treated Paula Radcliffe in the past, who was the world marathon record holder.
So with reference particularly to back health and back injury, what would you say are the main reasons people get injured when they're running?
Well, I think there are three main reasons. The first one would be overuse, and overuse is where you're running more than your body can actually handle at the time.
Yeah, so what would you say is more, how would you gauge that yourself?
Well, interesting you should ask that, because overuse can be just running too much, or it can be that your body is not prepared. So you could have not had a good sleep the night before, your nutrition might not be as good as it could be, you might not be stretching enough, for example, and so therefore your body's natural strength is lower than it should be, so you can overuse much easier. The next main reason is imbalance in the body structure. So runners often will stride forward with one leg more than they do with the other, and therefore they can create an unhealthy twist in the back, which can put stress onto some of the tissues. And the third main reason is lack of preparation. So people who go out running without first warming up.
And what sort of back-related injuries are people incurring?
Well, with overuse, you can end up with inflammation in the joints, sprained muscles, sprained ligaments, tendinitis. With a twisting and an imbalance in the way you run, you can end up with strain in the tissues in one side of the body. And thirdly, with lack of preparation, lack of stretching, you can actually end up with torn muscles.
So I've just started running myself, just little 5Ks, nothing like the medals here that I see. Are there any tips for beginners that you would recommend?
Well, thank you, Nichola, for that. Actually, these medals are for taking part, not for winning. Okay. But my tips for beginners, main tip is that when we stretch our back, obviously there are two sides to a back, and one side is always tighter than another. So when you're stretching, I would say always stretch the tighter side for twice as long as the loose side. And by doing that, you will bring the body back into balance and stop yourself from doing that twist that we were talking about earlier.
So I did suffer from sciatica when I first started running, but I found stretching and the practice of running itself just really helped. So I know there's a big debate out there, and we've been talking about it a little bit, to stretch or not to stretch.
That's right, Nichola. There is a bit of a big debate that's been running for a few years now in the running community. I think it's important to say we need to apply common sense to this. You know, there is a difference between warming up and stretching. So in order to warm up, just run around a bit, do a little bit of a walk or a walk jog. When we were at school, we used to just run around the football pitch a couple of times before we started to play games.
So what about stretching after running? And if you agree with that, for how long would you recommend?
Yes, well, when we've been running, obviously our muscles are warm and they are flexible. As we cool down, muscles get colder and they shorten. So stretching is a way of preventing the muscle from getting so short afterwards that you actually then get injured get more prone to injury after that when you start running again. So I would say probably about 10 minutes of stretching after you've run. Doesn't need to be too much.
So you treat people with all sorts of back injuries. I've just started work with a big corporate client, and the employees tend to run quite regularly. Would you recommend on the whole that running is good for back health?
I think very much so. Running in particularly actually is good. A lot of people don't know this, but it is good for disc injuries, just because of the nature of the way the mechanics work when we run. But I think that as long as runners don't overdo it, as long as you warm up and you stretch when you want to cool down, as long as you don't just go straight back to your desk after you have done a run at lunch, then I think it's very protective of the back. It helps to strengthen the core muscles and keeps you healthy.
Great advice, thank you. So finally, with a cold and wetter months coming upon us and Christmas around the corner, what would you recommend for winter training?
Well, I think that I would recommend not going straight out into the cold. So there are two things here. One is that it's good to be warm before you go out. My advice is to take a hot shower before you go out for a run. It really helps to keep warm the muscles up quickly. The second thing is, don't leap out of bed and get your trainers on and head straight out the door. Give it about 20 or 30 minutes. Walk around your flat or your house so that your body temperature rises up and you become more flexible before you go out.
Well, thank you very much, Gavin, for that fantastic practical advice. I'm both a registered osteopath and a runner yourself. I'll try and take it on board in my fledgling running career. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that and that you'll join us again soon on our next episode of Back Chat. In the meantime, if you're going out running, have fun and do take care.